Okay guys, let's get started. So we're going to create a game, and so we're going to click on new project. Now what we're going to do is put the project name up here. So we're just going to call it platformer game. You can call it whatever you like. You can also change this later on in the settings. In terms of the preset, this is the size of our game. So standard definition is what SD stands for. And then you got high definition, which is 1080p, and then you got 4K, which is probably a bit too large for us. We're going to stick with 1080p. Now you got two options for 1080p. You got landscape and you have portrait. So portrait is when you're looking at your phone normally, and landscape is when you turn your phone to the side and it's more wide than it is high. So we're going to do a landscape game. So we're going to click on that one. Now the viewport size is going to be, well, we're going to keep it the same for now, and I'll show you how to edit that later. Orientation is landscape, and we're going to just hit create. Okay, now the first thing you want to do is you'll see on the left side is your properties panel, on the right side is your actual project and layers, and up here on top is you've got your menu. You've got a back and forward button. You've got a play button, which we'll use later on. You've got your layout view, which is where we'll put all our images. And then you've got the coding sheet, which we'll look at later on. Now, we're going to start in the layout view. And if you just click once in the layout view, and then on your computer, if you've got a PC, hold down Control and click on minus. So holding down Control and clicking on minus and plus will allow you to zoom in and zoom out. If you've got a Mac, hold down Command and hit the minus button and the plus button, and you should be able to zoom out so you can see the entire white box. Now, over here you'll see there is a little dotted line that kind of gives us a little boundary. Now that is the viewing area, so that when the player plays their game, they only see this box, whatever's inside this box. So that means all this extra white area is your game world, and as your character moves around your game world, this box, which is little dotted lines, that'll follow your character through the game world. Now we're going to create a platformer game. And a platformer game, you got to think of it like a Mario type game. And with Mario, you basically start on the left side of your game world and you travel all the way to the right side, and there's usually some sort of finish area. So that's what we're going to do here. Now we're going to leave this the size of this viewport, this viewing area. But what we're going to do is change the size of our game world. So our game world, if I zoom out a little bit more, our game world should not be as high, but should be a lot wider. Now, if you want to change your game world, it's quite easy. Over here on the left side, you'll see your layout properties. And if you don't see that, all you got to do is click on your layout once to select it. And then you should have your layout, and you'll see the size over here. Now the size that we're going to put in today, we're going to roughly just put in, let's go with 10,000, and we're going to match the height of our actual viewport. So the height of our viewport was 1080, so 1080 pixels. So if we hit enter on that, we should see that our game world has gotten a lot wider, and the height matches the height of our viewport exactly now. So that is going to be the area that when you hit play and you can actually start playing your game, that's what you see. And as your character travels, they will be traveling through the world, going from left to right. Now, we're going to start bringing in some assets. And what you want to do before you bring in some assets is maybe just use blocks. So we're going to start off by using blocks to do our backgrounds and some of our characters, and then we will later on replace those blocks with some actual game characters. So let's go ahead and let's bring in our first image, and it's going to be the background image. So all you got to do is either double click or right click on the screen, and then you can go to insert new object. So if you right click, you can go insert new object. If you double click, it will go straight into that. So I'm going to right click and go insert new object. Now there's heaps of objects you can pick from, and there's a few that we're going to eventually add. However, the ones you're most likely going to be using quite a bit is going to be one called Sprite. So that is for any type of character that's in your world, whether it's one that you control or an enemy, any type of blocks or interactive pieces you want in your game world, you'll bring them in as sprites. The first thing we're going to bring in is a background. So we're going to click on tiled background. You could bring it in as a sprite, but I'm going to show you what tiled background does. It kind of repeats the image over and over, which is really good. So we're going to hit insert on that. And now it's following my mouse cursor and it wants to know where we want to put it. Just click anywhere on the screen and you'll get this little pop-up. Now for now, all we want is one color. So I'm going to pick like a sky blue, and over here just pick any color you want, and then click on the little paint bucket icon and drop yourself that color into the sprite area. And then you can close it. Once you've closed it and you've selected your color, you'll see you've got a little square, and we can bring it to the top left. And if I zoom out, what we can do is actually stretch this out so it fits my entire game world. And there's our first image in, and it is our tiled background. All right, excellent. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in our character, but it's just going to be another block. So we'll bring in pictures later, but for now we're just working with blocks. Before we do that, what we might do is over here on the layers panel, and this is something that you will look at doing in terms of locking layers and locking things that should move and shouldn't move and things like that. What we want to do is just add a layer on top, and what we're going to do is on layer 0, we're just going to right click and rename it, and we'll just call it background. And we can leave layer 1 and just leave it as what it's called, layer 1. Now what you want to do over here with our background image, we want to ensure that that is in the background layer and not in layer 1. So what we can do, we can right click on our background, and we can go, and I'll just zoom in, we can go over here to Z order, and we can move this to the background layer. So if done correctly, what you'll see is if I turn the tick off background, our background actually disappears. So there's no background. Okay, so that's really, really important. Now the reason why we're doing that, to separate the background from everything else, is so that we can actually lock it. Now what happens when you lock your background? We can't move it anymore, which is perfect, because what you'll find is when you've got all these other characters in your game world and you want to move one and another, you might accidentally move the background. So it's a really easy way of just locking that in. Now later on, when we're going to adjust the background image, we will need to unlock that so that we're able to select it and edit it. Okay, but for now we're going to keep it locked. Okay, we're going to bring in a new sprite, and before you bring it in, make sure that you have layer 1 selected, because you don't want to put anything else into the background layer. Everything else we're going to bring in will go into layer 1. So we're going to right click the screen and we're going to go to insert new object. And this time we're going to bring in a sprite. And again, it's following my cursor. I just click anywhere on the screen, and we've got this popping up. Now later on I'll show you how to actually bring in pictures and do animations. However, for now we're just going to pick another color. So I'm going to pick green for my character, and I'm going to use the paint bucket tool, and I'm just going to drop green color in there, and then I'll click on the X. Couple of things before we continue. It is really important when you bring in a new sprite that you name that sprite. So over here you'll see the properties, and this is going to be my player, so I want to actually call it player. You can call it character, you can call it whatever you like, but just make sure you name your character. It's really important. Now I'm going to make my character look more like a character, so I'm going to make it a little bit thinner and taller. And hopefully that looks a little bit better. Now, if I was to play my game right now, nothing's going to happen. However, if I had the ability to actually control my character, what would happen to my character? He or she would just fall to their death because there's no ground. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to bring a ground on the floor. So to do that, we're going to bring in another sprite. So we're going to right click the screen and go insert new object, and we're going to select sprite again and hit insert, click anywhere on the screen. And now in this pop-up, we kind of want, and again, remember, we're gonna probably replace this with other images, but for now, we'll just pick something like a dark brown, and we can hit the X. Don't forget to rename it. So over here on the properties panel, we'll call it ground, or you could call it floor. And what we're going to do with this layer, we're going to bring it all the way down here, and we're going to stretch it out. I'm going to stretch it out all the way because the ground is going to cover the entire scene of my game, and it can go out of the area a little bit. That's fine, and that's what we want there. Cool. So right now we brought in a background, we brought in a character, and we brought in the floor or the ground. At the moment, the game doesn't know what these are. All it knows is they're colored and they're sprites and they're in your game world. However, it doesn't know what they are and what they should do. So right now we need to add something called behaviors to the two sprites that we've got, the floor and the player. We're going to start with the floor first. So to bring in a behavior, you select the floor or the sprite you want. And over here on the left side, you'll see something called behaviors. And we're going to click on behaviors. And we're going to add a new behavior. Now, the behavior we're going to add to the floor is called a solid. And what you're doing is you're telling the game that this object is going to be a solid, meaning nothing can go through it. Because it's the floor, we don't want our character floating through the floor going down. We want it to sit on top of the floor as it's walking around and things like that. So by making it a solid, we make sure that the player can't walk through it. We're going to do the same thing for our character. We're going to click on behaviors, and we're going to add a behavior, and we're going to call it a solid as well. Now, there are a couple of other behaviors we need to add onto our character, but before we do anything, let's actually go over here to the play button and let's click play. Now it might ask you to enable pop-ups and things like that. Just say yes to enable it. So here is our floor, here is our character, there's our background. Nothing can happen at the moment. I can't control the character, can't do anything yet. Okay, so just want to show you that. Let's go back into the game world, and what we want to do is we want to actually add some functionality to our character. So we're going to go back to behaviors, and we're going to add one more behavior. So let's click add. The behavior we're going to add is called platform. And if you can't find it, you can always search for it as well. But there it is there, platform, and we're going to click on the add button. So now we've made the character a solid and given it the behavior called platform. So let's actually go and hit play on it now and see what happens. And there we go. You can actually use your arrow keys on your keyboard to move the character around. And you can even jump using the up arrow key. And you can see it's not falling past the floor. Now, have a look at this. As I move the character along, it actually goes out of the screen and I can't see it anymore. So there's one more behavior we're going to add. So let's go back to behaviors and let's click on behaviors for our character. And we're going to add the behavior called scroll to. Now, if you don't know what some of these behaviors mean, if you go to the bottom, it'll also tell you what that behavior does. So this scroll to always centers the view on this object or at the midpoint of multiple objects. So for example, if we add this on, what's going to happen is our viewport is going to follow our character as it moves through the game world. So if I move right, it will continually go right. So I'm actually moving, but you can't see at the moment. And I'll just go left, I'll go travel back left, and there we are, we're back. Now I can actually fall off the left side because we haven't set any boundaries there, so I can kind of die there. But we'll fix that up later on. Okay, so we've got our character, we've got our ground, we've got our background. One of the things that I want to do is create a couple of little red Sprite boxes so that we can actually see the character traveling. So let's right click the screen, let's insert a new object, and we're going to bring in another sprite, and we're going to make it red, and let's just dump red in there, click X, and I'll resize it. I'm going to put one about here, and then I'm going to travel down a fair bit, and oh, let's actually, don't forget to name this, and let's just call it red box, because that's exactly what it is. So red box, and then over here on the right side where our project is, we're actually going to drag another version of red box onto the screen, and we'll just separate them, make them a little bit further away from each other. Might bring one down, something like that. Let's also make them a solid, so if we add a behavior, and that way our character will have to jump over them to go through them. Let's do something like that. Cool. Okay, so let's hit the play button now, and let's get our character and move them along the world, and there we go. Cool. Okay. Excellent. Now, before we progress, what I want to show you guys is on our character, we can actually adjust the speed of the movements. So if you go down, if you click on the character, you go down to where your behaviors are, you will see the platform behavior, this one right here. And what you can do with platform behavior is actually adjust the speed of your character. So have a look at the settings that I'm going to put in. So I'm going to make max speed 600. I'm going to make acceleration faster, so I want my character to move faster. I'm going to make it 2000. Jump strength, I might increase that slightly, so we'll make it, let's go with 750. Actually, we'll go a little bit more. Let's go 900, just so we can see a difference. Gravity, I'm going to increase that as well. We'll make that 2000. Fall speed, we'll bring that up to 1500. We're going to enable double jump, and if you don't know what double jump is, it basically means you can click the jump button twice and the character will jump higher. Let's, with those selected, changed values, let's hit play again and see how our character reacts. So my character is slightly faster. It can now double jump. Before it could not jump up to this second square, which is, it's good that it can get that high. Now you may not want it to go that high. It's completely up to you, and you can adjust those values. Okay, so take your time, get the values right, You may go back later on and adjust those at any time. Okay, so now we're up to actually bringing in real images, animating our characters, changing the backgrounds, changing everything, and making it look good. Now, I've actually got a website or a Google Drive link for you guys, and the URL is bit.ly/construct 3 characters. So if you go to this URL, bit.ly/construct 3 characters, and you hit enter on that, and you got to do it in the address bar. So you got to do it right up here. Don't do it in a Google search because that won't work. So you got to do it up here. You've got to spell it exactly how I've spelt it. If you go to it, you will then be presented with the Google Drive with all the pictures you need for this tutorial. Now, again, if you don't end up getting directed to this particular website with these files, then you've probably misspelt it. So double check the spelling, make sure you're in the URL bar, not Google search bar, and you're typing it correctly. So the first couple of things we want to download, guys, is the background image. So if you right-click background and hit download, and we're also going to download the coconut character, idle. So that's the standing animation, and I'll show you guys these pictures once they download. We're going to go and we're going to download the running animation. We're going to download the idle to run animation. Awesome, and we'll work on the jump ones later on. So let's just stick with those for now, and let's get going. So those have been downloaded into my downloads folder. And if I show you what one of the images looks like, you'll see that there is a strip of characters. So we're going to have a look at how you bring that in. So first thing we want to do is adjust the background. Now remember, the background is locked. It's in another layer that's locked. So what I want to do is unlock that layer. So I'm going to click the little lock icon to unlock it. I can now select my background and I can adjust it if I want. What I want to do is edit this. So right click it and hit edit. And when you've got it open, we're going to replace this color with a picture. So over here, right at the top, you've got a couple of buttons here. And this one over here, the one that looks like a folder, it says load an image from a file. So we're going to click on that button. Once you click on that button, it's going to ask you where the file is. I want you to look for the background image folder file, and we're going to hit open. And you should see the blue sky has now been replaced with the background photo. Now, because it's a tiled background, we didn't bring it in as a sprite, we brought it in as a tiled background. This is going to repeat automatically for us. So once we brought the image in, we can hit the X button. And if I zoom all the way out so we can have a look at our picture, I'll just bring it up here. You can actually see the image repeats if you make it really big. Now, we just want to see the grass area and the trees. So I'll make it that size and I'll bring it back down. And let's zoom back in and have a look at how it looks. And then we can adjust it if we want. That looks pretty good. I think I'll keep that. And if I'm happy with it, then we're going to hit the lock on the background layer to lock it in place. And for now, that looks pretty good. What we'll do, we'll hit the play button and just see what it looks like. We can always adjust it later. Okay, so there's my character. Double jump working. Excellent. So we're getting somewhere. Awesome. Next thing we're going to do is replace the actual main character. And we're going to spend a lot of time getting your character correct. So let's jump back in. And let's right click on your character and hit edit. Now with our character, it's really important that we do this slowly and precisely and make sure we don't make any mistakes. So the first thing I want to show you guys is the animations over here. So at the moment we've only got one animation. It's called animation 1. But what we can do is add multiple animations. So you could add a few in now. And each one is different. So for example, I could bring in a red color there, I could bring in a blue color here. So animation 1 is green, animation 2 is red, animation 3 is blue. Different animations can have different pictures associated with them. Okay, now we're going to bring in our first picture, and this is animation 1. So stay on animation 1, right click animation 1 and rename it, and we're going to call it idle. You could also call it standing if you want, or stand. Idle just means not moving, staying still. Okay. Now on idle, making sure that we're on idle, we're going to go down here where it says idle frames, and we're going to right click the white area, and we're going to go import frames from a strip, because we downloaded the coconut character and it comes in a strip. We're going to get that one. So the picture we want is just called idle. It's not idle to run or run, it's just called idle. So let's bring that one in. And what it does here, it tells us that it's detected 11 images. So it should detect it automatically, so just leave the numbers as is and hit import. And what it'll do, we'll take that one image and cut up all the sprites, and you can see they've all been cut up into their own frame. And they're all slightly different as well. So if I zoom in and we have a look, you can actually see the character is slowly moving. So we're going to have a look at that in a sec. We don't need the color, so that 0 frame, we can delete that. Right click and hit delete. So you should end up from frame 0 all the way to frame 10, which is 11 pictures all up. Now, we're not finished yet. I want you to click on idle animation once, and when you've selected idle animation, the animation properties should come up. Now, if we were to keep it as is, we're going to have a couple of issues. It's a little bit slow and it's not repeating. So what we want to do, so again, make sure you've got idle selected. Go down here and change the speed. Now, I'm just going to set the speed to 30, but you can adjust that later. Make it slower or faster depending on how you want your character to be idling. And we also want the animation to loop. And what that means is, when the character is going through all these frames, it won't stop at frame number 10. It will just keep going around and around, and it will animate. Okay, so what we can actually do before we jump back in here, let me just quickly have a look, and we'll just hit the play button and see what our character looks like. Oh, should probably adjust the dimensions of our character as well. So let me have a quick look at this character. Let's make it a little bit bigger. That's probably better there. And let's hit the play button now. Okay, and there it is animating. It is literally standing still, but it's kind of bobbing up and down, which is pretty cool. And it's doing that automatically. Now you can notice the feet aren't touching the ground, and that's something I'm going to show you guys with the Polygon attributes for your characters. We'll be doing that once we bring in the other animation. You can now move your character around, although he's not running because we haven't brought that animation picture in. Okay, so he's kind of just sliding along the path, and he can jump and things like that. Okay, so let's start getting the other animations in. So right click back onto your character, let's go edit, and let's focus on animation 2. And now we're going to right click this area here, and we're going to go import from strip. Now this one is going to be our run picture, so run.png, and let's bring that in. It's detected 21 images, so let's hit import on that. And we don't want the red or, frame 0 where it's got the color in it, so delete that if you do have one. And you should be left with frame 0 to 20. Also, we forgot to actually rename it, so let's right click our animation, hit rename, and we're going to call it run. So this is going to be our running animation. And with that selected, ensure that you go down to your animation properties and you change it to 30 and make sure it's looped. So make sure you click on it, and then you should see the animation properties. Now, if I was to close this and hit play, he's not going to run. You're not going to see the animation running, okay? We need to do a little bit of programming for that to happen, okay? So just letting you guys know, just by bringing in the picture, the game doesn't know that you want to change animations to run, okay? So we need to actually code that, and we're going to do that very soon. But before we do that, we need to adjust the polygons. And you would have noticed that our character does not stand on the ground. He's like floating above the ground. Now, to fix that, what we need to do is adjust the polygons. And over here, you'll see it looks like a triangle. It's called the collision polygon. And you can see if I click on it, you'll see that there is a box around my character. And that is the collision box. That is what the game interprets is part of your character. So all this white space, the game thinks that is your character, and that's wrong. So what we want to do is actually bring these points in. We want to bring it in close to its feet and its body. And that should be the collision points right there. So if your character gets hit anywhere here, it collides here, that's where it's going to stop. Now, unfortunately, we need to actually do that on every single frame. So you'll notice in your idle animation, we've got 11 pictures, 0 to 10. So we've got to go through and do it for all of them. Now, if you click on the next picture, you can then go and drag that in. Now, there are shorter ways of doing it, but I want you guys to just do this for now. Go through again, frame by frame. And make sure, really important, make sure that the base is nice and flat. And that way your character is going to be standing correctly. Now, there are other ways of doing it, and I'll show you one now. So another way of doing it is when you're in the frame, you can right-click. You can say guess the polygon shape, but our character is quite complex and there's gaps and things like that. So it's not going to guess this particular character very well. So when we click on it, it goes boop, and it's forgot the legs and things like that. So you kind of got to bring that down. A lot of the times with more basic characters like our enemies that we're going to bring in later, it will work, but sometimes it doesn't. Another thing we can do is when we go to the next polygon, we can right click and we can say copy previous collision poly, and it will copy it to the best of its ability, but we may need to adjust it slightly. So we can continue doing that. That'll probably give us a bit of a shortcut as we're going through it. And we may need to just adjust it slightly as we're doing it. Because if you notice maybe the shoes or something go outside the polygon area, then just go back in and adjust it. Now, once you've done the idle animation, I want you guys to go and do the run animation. Now, run animation's got 21 pictures, so go through and do each one. So we'll do the first one manually. Make sure that the floor is nice and flat. That's really important. Make sure it's nice and flat at the bottom there. And we'll go to the next frame and we can right click and go copy previous. And it looks like it might need to go a little bit up. There we go. So you might have to just adjust it a little bit each time. That looks pretty good. Just to save time, let's fly through this, but you guys should do it a little bit more precisely than I am. I'm just gonna fly through this just to save time with this tutorial. But I want you guys to take care, especially that ground area. What you'll notice is when I'm gonna play my game, my character's not going to be running as smoothly as yours if you take your time and do it properly. Okay. We're going to come back for animation 3. Our character's probably going to have maybe 5 or 6 animations by the end of the game. But let's close this panel once you've finished all the polygon. And let's hit play and just have a look at our character and where our character sits on the ground. And now you can actually notice our character is walking on the ground pretty precisely. That's pretty good right there. Alright. Now, the next thing we got to do is actually get it so that as our character is moving, he goes or she goes into the running animation. So let's close our little game preview. And to do this, we're going to do our first ever bit of coding. So we're going to go to the event sheet and we're going to add in some code. Now, how does coding work? It's pretty easy if it is logical, if it makes sense to you, then it should work. Okay, obviously the more coding we put on, the more complex it gets over time. So we're going to start with some basic stuff. And we're going to add an event, and an event should then trigger something called an action. So let's bring in our first event. And our first event is going to basically be whenever you click on the right arrow or left arrow on your keyboard. Oh, actually, before we actually need to add in a couple of things onto our layout. I forgot. So obviously for keyboard movement, and depending on what type of game you're creating, you need to add in more, well, what we call objects. Almost like a sprite. So let's pretend we're bringing in another sprite. Right click on the screen and go insert new object. And you'll see all of these different things. We need to bring in a couple of things. And if I go to where it says input, you're going to see a couple of things there. One's called mouse, the other one's called keyboard. One is touch and one is gamepad. So depending on where you're creating your game, for example, if you create your game so that it can be played with a controller, like a PlayStation controller or an Xbox controller, then you'd need those sort of inputs. Now, our game is going to be played using a keyboard. We may end up using a mouse for something. If you were planning on playing it on like an iPad, so like a touch screen, then you would import this input behavior called touch. We're going to use predominantly keyboard. We may use mouse. So let's bring in keyboard, and then let's right click the screen, insert new object, and let's also bring in mouse. Now there's no problem bringing all of them in now, but we probably won't use the others in this particular tutorial. So let's jump back into your event sheet, and Remember to switch layer to event sheet, you just click in on the tabs up here. So we're going to click on add event. So click on add event, and we're going to go and we're going to add a keyboard event. So let's click on keyboard. Now what we're looking for is when the right arrow key is pressed, something is going to happen. And then later on we're going to look at when the left arrow key is pressed, something should happen. And basically what we want is, if you're pressing the left or right arrow key, the animation switches to the running animation. If you're not pressing those keys, then the animation should set to idle, where he's just standing. Our character is just standing. So we want to look for, is key is down. So it's going to look to see if key is down. So we're going to click on next. It's going to ask us what key are we looking for. So click in there, and all you have to do is press the right arrow key on your keyboard. And if you press that key, you'll see it'll say right arrow key. I mean, if I press A, B, C, whatever, it will change to that particular keyboard command. But we want the right arrow. So click right arrow on your keyboard and then click OK. Once you've done that, you'll see it should say key, right arrow, hit done. So the keyboard event is when the person playing the game clicks on the right arrow key. When they're holding that button down, something's going to happen. There's got to be an action. So we're going to click in there, and the action is going to be applied on our character, the player. So we're going to click on player, and we're going to set an animation. So we're going to click on set animation. I'm going to hit next. Now the animation, we called it run. So you need to remember what you named your animation. I named it run. So if you copied me in the tutorial, it will be called run. If you can't remember your animation, what you can do is go find expressions, and you can try and search for it here by going to player and looking for the animations that you may have created, and that you should be able to find them in this group here. Now, if you also couldn't remember, well, you can quickly go back to your character, edit it, and then have a look. So we've called one animation idle and the other one run over here on the top right. So going back to the event sheet, add an action on our character. We want to set the animation, and we are setting the animation to run from beginning. So it's going to start the animation from the beginning, and I'm going to hit done. Now that'll work. However, it's not going to switch back. So let's just hit play, see what happens. Okay, so here's my character. He's just idle. But if I hit the right key on my keyboard, you're going to see it run. But if I let go of it, it doesn't go back to normal. It's moonwalking right now. Okay, so we need to be able to go back to normal. So that's what we're going to do next. So we've got it so that when you press the right arrow key, the animation runs. What we wanted to do is so that when you press the left arrow key, it also runs, but in the other way. He actually turns and faces the other way. So we're going to, just over here, just underneath where it says keyboard, we're going to right click there, and we're going to add a else. And now we're going to right click, and we're going to add another condition. And that condition is going to be another keyboard event. And we're going to look at if the key is down, and we'll tell it what key we're looking for. We can click in here, and we're going to click on the left key, the left arrow key on my keyboard. Hit OK. Hit done. So right now the code says when keyboard right is down, set animation to run from beginning. Else, if the person playing the game presses the left key and holds that button down, what should happen? Well, we also want our character to set the animation to run. Now we're going to do one more thing. We're going to right click and we're going to add another condition. Actually, I'm going to add another we're going to add a, let me see how we can do this. Add, oh, there we go. Cool. So just right click again, and what you want to do, oh, actually, what you want to do is right click this left area here, just outside of that. So just right click there and go to add, and then go to add else. So we're going to add another else. So keyboard right is down, else keyboard left is down, else I'm going to add the final animation for now, set animation, and let's set it to idle. You may have called it stand or standing. Just make sure you name it exactly what you want. And if that is what you have in your coding, we're going to hit the play button and we're going to have a look at see what it does. So let's click play. And here's our character, and if I click on the right arrow key now, he's running to the right. If I stop holding down the right arrow key, he goes back to normal, which is great. Now I'm going to click on the left arrow key, and he's running, but he's actually facing the other way. So when he's going left, he's actually still facing the other way. So we're going to fix that up now as well. Now to fix that, we're going to add in two more actions, one here and one here. And we're going to basically tell it which way to face. So we're going to add an action onto our player, and we're going to change the way it appears. The appearance, we're going to set it to mirrored when it goes left. So when it goes right, it should be not mirrored. And when we go left, we want it to be mirrored. And what that means is to look the opposite way. So that is our final coding. Let's have a quick look at that for now. So we've got right keyboard is down, set animation to run, set not mirrored, else when the keyboard left is down, set animation to run, set it to mirrored so it faces the other way, else if neither of those things are happening, then we want you to set the animation to idle. So let's see if that works. I'll hit the play button and we can play our game. And I'm moving from right to left, and there it is. Our character's actually facing the right way. Perfect. Awesome, guys. Cool. Now that is going to end part 1 of this tutorial. In the next part of the tutorial, we're going to bring in enemies. We're going to do more coding. We're probably going to change these boxes into something more stylistic and something that's going to look better than just a red box, and bring more things that we can interact with. Awesome. Now, before we do move on, we need to look at how to save our game, which is really, really important. So if we go up to menu, we can go to project and we can go save as, and there's a couple of ways you can save it. Now, the way I want you to save it is by saving to the cloud. So if you click on cloud, what should happen is it will open up your Google account, and what you want to do is use your school email. And if you sign in with your school email, you will then be able to save this to your Google Drive account. Okay, so your school email and your school password, and then you'll be able to save this. So I've created a folder, so we can go to classes, year 7, and I'll just give this a name, tutorial platformer game, and I'll hit save. And that is saved. Now, another way of saving it, if Google Drive isn't working for you, what you can do is go File, Project, Save As, and you can download a copy, this one over here. And I'll just give it a name, tutorial platformer game, and let's hit save on that. And now let's pretend that we've closed our game and we want to go back to our game. We go to the website editor.construct.net. Once that website's loaded, instead of clicking on New Project, we go over here and we can either load it from the cloud or we can load it from a file. So if you saved it correctly into your Google Drive, you'll click on Cloud. It should load up your Google Drive, and then you just need to find that file wherever you saved it. There it is there, and load it up. Now, if you couldn't save it to the cloud, then it's probably saved in a file. So I'm going to click on File, and I saved it to my Downloads folder. So there it is there. So I'm going to click on that and hit Open. And then our file will open up, and we'll be back exactly where we left off. Okay, guys? So I will see you guys in the next tutorial when we start to bring in more characters, a couple of enemies, and later on we'll look at doing coding so that you can collect things. You'll have lives and you'll lose lives as your character touches the enemies and gets hit by them and things like that. Awesome. See you guys in the next tutorial.